Now, we know that the words por y para both mean for. But we also know that you have to use each of these words at different times to describe different things. So, when do we use each of these and how do we use them? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, first we're going to discuss the word por and when you use that to mean for in Spanish. So, what we're going to do is look at the acronym DEEMS, or DIMS, depending on how you want to pronounce it. So that is DEMMMS. Now, it might seem a little weird, but it will help you remember it. So the D in DIMS stands for duration. Duration means how long you're doing something. So for an example, you would say, Yo estudié por 3 horas. Now that means I studied for 3 hours. The E in DIMS stands for exchange. So this would say like you went to the store, and you would say, you bought something for $10. So, yo compro la camisa por $3. So, it's how much it costs you to exchange it. Or he gave it to me for his shirt. Something like that. Now, the first M stands for motivation. And that would be why you're doing what you're doing. Why are you doing that? So, yo estudio por mis notas. I study for my grades. Or yo trabajo por mis hijos. I work for my children. Something like that. Second M stands for means. Now, this means how you're doing something, which a lot of times that means how you're being transported around. So you would say, yo voy a la playa por mi coche. I go to the beach, like, through my car, by my car. The way that you're doing something. The third M means movement. So this kind of goes with means, but it's how you're doing something. So a lot of times you'd say, yo camino por el parque. So that means I'm walking through the park. Por is kind of interesting because it does mean for, but it also has a lot of different meanings as well that don't directly translate into English. So when you're saying yo camino por el parque, that's saying I'm walking through the park, but it doesn't really translate like that into English. And finally, the S stands for substitution. Whoops. Spelled that wrong. Substitution. All right. So that would mean it's kind of like exchanging something. Like you're substituting it for something else. So you'd be like, yo uso la leche por el agua en mis galletas, which probably wouldn't be a very good thing because that's saying you substituted milk for water in your cookies, but that's just how it is. So that's our first look at por with the acronym DIMS. Now we're going to look at the word para. Now, para is a lot less complicated than the word por because para really does mainly just mean for. It can also mean in order to, but if you're guessing between por and para, most of the time the answer is para. So if you can understand the uses for para, it'll be easier to understand how to use por. So the acronym that we use for para is PRODS. So PRODDS. Now the P stands for purpose. Now this is kind of similar to what we said earlier about motivation, but this is where the para means in order to. So yo leo para aprender. I read in order to learn. I read to learn. The R stands for recipient. So this is pretty simple. It's if you're buying something for someone or giving it to them or they're getting it, it's para él, para mí. Yo compro la camisa para mí. I buy the shirt for me. The O stands for opinion. So this is where you'd say, para mí es mejor caminar en vez de correr. For me, it's better to walk than run. The first D stands for destination, which simply means like where you're going. So like yo voy para las islas. Like I'm going to the islands. Yo voy para el baño. I'm going to the bathroom. That's where I'm going. And that's when you use the word para. D, the second D stands for deadline, which is used to indicate a deadline or due date. So I would say el proyecto es para el 20 de mayo. The project is for the 20th of May. And then finally, the S stands for standards, or standard. Now, this is like a comparison. So you'd say, él es muy bajo para un niño de su edad. He's very short for a boy his age. Yo soy muy alta para una mujer. You know, that kind of thing. I'm very tall for a woman. Comparisons to the world around you. So today we talked about the differences between the words por y para, both meaning for. Well, and we learned a lot of other things. But, so the two acronyms that we looked at for these was for para, it was PRODS, PRODDS, and for por, it was DEMS, DEMMMS. Now, these are honestly really complicated, and it takes a lot of practice to remember the uses for both of these words. Even sometimes native speakers have trouble remembering when to use each of them, so don't be discouraged if this was confusing or difficult, because it just requires a lot of practice. So you can do it, and you can understand the difference between the two.